When we speak about water, we often reduce it to a utility, something that comes from a tap, something we complain about when it's late or dirty, something we only truly notice when it's gone. But if we pause for a moment, just a moment, and strip away habit, convenience and routine, water becomes something far deeper. It becomes a question Allah places quietly in front of every human being. Asterisk, do you remember where you came from? Asterisk, Allah tells us in the Qur'an that He made every living thing from water. This is not poetry meant to impress. It is a statement of origin. Before identity, before achievement, before failure, before sin and repentance, there was water. Your story did not begin with your name, your passport, or your profession. It began in a hidden place, in darkness, with a fluid you never saw, controlled by laws you never set, sustained by a mercy you did not earn. That alone should humble the most arrogant heart. What is fascinating is that this truth was declared long before laboratories, microscopes, and modern biology. Science arrived late to a reality Allah had already revealed. And that tells us something important. Revelation was never meant to compete with science. It was meant to guide the human being before knowledge turned into pride. The Qur'an doesn't shout these facts. It states them calmly, as if saying, this has always been obvious. If you were paying attention, psychologically, humans struggle with origins. We prefer to define ourselves by what we've achieved, not by what we were given. But water dismantles that illusion. You did not choose your first breath. You did not decide the rhythm of your heart. You did not design the system that keeps your cells alive. All of it traces back to water, and all of it traces back to Allah. Recognizing this is not meant to weaken you, it's meant to ground you. A person who knows their true origin walks differently, less arrogance, more awareness, less entitlement, more responsibility. Think about how silent this miracle is. Fire demands attention, earth shows strength, wind announces itself, but water works quietly. It flows, it seeps, it nourishes, it sustains, without noise, and there is a lesson in that. Allah often places His greatest signs in the things we overlook. Not every miracle splits the sea. Some miracles are the sea, existing every day, asking nothing, proving everything. Philosophically, water also challenges our obsession with control. You can build walls, invent machines, pass laws, but without water, all of it collapses. Civilizations rose near rivers and fell when water disappeared. Empires bowed not to armies, but to drought. This should tell us something profound. Human power is always conditional, always dependent. The sooner a person accepts this, the sooner anxiety loosens its grip. You stop pretending to be the source and start reconnecting with the source, and then there is the personal dimension. When you drink water, you are not just quenching thirst, you are participating in a cycle Allah set in motion long before you existed. The same substance that sustains you today sustained generations before you and will sustain generations after you, if Allah wills. That continuity should awaken gratitude, but it should also awaken accountability. If Allah made life from water, then disrespecting it is not just environmental negligence, it is spiritual carelessness. This understanding prepares the heart for everything that follows. When you realize that life itself is a gift delivered through something so simple, so accessible, so often wasted, you begin to see the world differently. Gratitude becomes easier, patience becomes more logical, trust in Allah becomes more natural, because you are reminded that He has been sustaining you since before you were aware enough to ask. And perhaps that is the greatest message hidden in water as the first sign of life. Allah was taking care of you long before you knew how to take care of yourself. He was present before your consciousness, before your dua, before your struggle. That realization alone can soften the hardest heart, so the next time you see water, don't just see a necessity, see a reminder of where you came from, who sustains you, and how quietly Allah proves His presence every single day. Because a person who remembers their origin will never lose their direction. When we observe water beyond its existence, beyond the fact that it gives life, we begin to notice something even more profound, its balance. Not just that it exists, but how it exists. It does not come in chaos. It does not arrive randomly. It falls, flows, evaporates, returns, again and again, in a system so precise that if it were slightly altered, life as we know it would collapse. This is where the silent miracle deepens. Allah did not only create water, He disciplined it. The Qur'an reminds us that rain is sent down in due measure. That phrase alone deserves reflection. Due measure means restraint. It means intention, it means mercy guided by wisdom. If rain fell endlessly, we would drown. If it stopped completely, we would starve. And yet, most of the time, we live between these extremes, unaware of how narrow that margin truly is. Psychologically, humans crave abundance but rarely think about limits. Water teaches us that survival itself depends not on excess, but on balance. Think about how quickly our perception changes when that balance shifts. A few weeks without rain and people speak of drought, anxiety rises, prayers increase. A few days of excessive rain and the same water becomes a source of fear, destruction, and loss. The substance did not change, our relationship to it did. And that mirrors life itself. Many of our blessings turn into burdens not because Allah changed them, but because balance was lost. There is a powerful lesson here about mercy. We often imagine mercy as constant ease, uninterrupted comfort, and unlimited provision. But Allah's mercy is wiser than our desires. True mercy sustains you without spoiling you. It gives enough to grow, not enough to forget. Water never flatters human ego. It reminds us, subtly and repeatedly, that comfort without discipline leads to ruin. Philosophically, this balance challenges the modern illusion that everything must be maximized. More speed, more wealth, more consumption. Water moves slowly, deliberately. Rivers do not rush to the sea in panic. Rain does not fall all at once. Even waves rise and retreat. Allah built restraint into the system of life, yet humans insist on excess, then wonder why anxiety, burnout, and dissatisfaction follow. The imbalance outside often mirrors the imbalance within. Psychologically, balance provides security. The human mind needs predictability to feel safe. The consistent cycle of water, rain, rivers, evaporation creates a rhythm that life depends on. When that rhythm is disrupted, the mind feels it before the body does. Stress increases, fear sets in. Allah, in His mercy, designed a world where stability is the default, not chaos, and that stability is a sign for those who reflect. There is also humility in recognizing how little margin for error exists. If the earth were slightly closer to the sun, water would evaporate excessively. Slightly farther, it would freeze. If rainfall patterns shifted too far, agriculture would collapse. These are not abstract theories. They are realities scientists observe with concern. For the believer, this is not panic-inducing, it is grounding. It reinforces the understanding that existence is not self-sustaining, it is maintained. And yet, despite this precision, humans often live as though balance is optional. We waste water, pollute it, exploit it, then act surprised when shortages and disasters follow. This is not punishment arriving suddenly, it is consequence unfolding gradually. Allah allows imbalance to reveal itself so that human beings might wake up before it is too late. Mercy is sometimes delayed destruction, giving space for correction. This lesson extends beyond the physical. Just as water must remain balanced to sustain life, so must the human being. Too much fear paralyzes. Too much confidence blinds, too much attachment suffocates, too much detachment empties. Allah teaches us moderation through the very elements we depend on. Water does not preach, but it teaches relentlessly. When a believer internalizes this, their relationship with Allah matures. They stop demanding extremes and start trusting wisdom. They learn to say, Ya Allah, give me what is best, not just what is easy. They begin to recognize that unanswered du'as, delayed relief, and measured provision may be forms of protection they do not yet understand. So when you next see rain fall gently, or a river flowing steadily, don't just see movement. See mercy in control, see power restrained, see a lesson written without words, because a life lived in balance is not an accident. It is a response to recognizing the one who measures everything perfectly. As we move deeper into understanding water, we begin to realize that Allah did not only design it to sustain our bodies, but to educate our souls. Water does something remarkable: it cleans, and in that act of cleaning, it teaches lessons far beyond hygiene. Every time a believer approaches water for purification, Allah is not just removing physical impurity, He is training the heart in humility, awareness, and renewal. Think about how purification begins. Before Salah, before standing in front of Allah, you are asked to wash parts of your body that are already visibly clean. Your hands, your face, your feet. Most of the time there is no dirt, so why wash them? Because the purpose is not dirt, it is readiness. Allah is teaching you that approaching Him requires intention, presence, and a conscious pause from the noise of life. Water becomes the bridge between the outer world and the inner state. Psychologically, this is powerful. Human beings carry invisible weight, stress, guilt, anger, distraction. These things don't wash away on their own. Wudu forces a reset. It interrupts autopilot. You stop scrolling, rushing, worrying, and you turn to water. Cool, grounding, repetitive. The mind slows down, the body follows. This is not accidental. Allah knows the human psyche better than any therapist. He built healing into worship, and notice the mercy in repetition. You don't purify once and you're done for life. You purify again and again. That alone should change how we view our own flaws. If Allah expected perfection, there would be no need for repeated cleansing. But He knows we forget, we slip, we get stained by life, so He provides a way back. Simple, accessible, and gentle. Water does not interrogate you, it does not shame you, it cleans you and moves on. Philosophically, water teaches us that purity is a process, not a permanent state. This challenges a deep human misconception. We often believe that if we fail once, we are ruined. If we fall, we are hypocrites. If we struggle, we are distant from Allah. But water says otherwise. It says, come back. Again and again and again, as long as you are willing to return, purification remains possible. There is also humility in how purification is performed. You don't use luxury, you don't need excess. The Prophet taught that even at a flowing river, waste is discouraged. This teaches restraint, consciousness, and gratitude. Water reminds us that spirituality is not about extravagance, it is about sincerity. A small amount, used with awareness, carries immense value. Look at how water prepares you to stand before Allah. You wash the face, the place of identity. You wash the hands, the tools of action. You wipe the head, the center of thought. You wash the feet, the means of movement. It's as if Allah is reminding you, cleanse how you think, how you act, where you go, and how you present yourself. This is not ritual for ritual's sake. This is moral alignment through physical action. Even ghusl carries profound meaning. After states of vulnerability, exhaustion, or intimacy, Allah commands a full return to purity, not to erase humanity, but to honor it. Water restores dignity. It closes chapters gently. It allows a person to move forward without carrying residue from what has passed. That psychological closure is essential for emotional health, yet many people live without it, replaying guilt, replaying regret. Islam offers water as a release, and consider this. Allah chose water, not fire, not wind, not earth, as the primary means of purification. Fire destroys, water restores. Fire leaves scars, water leaves freshness. That choice alone tells us something about how Allah wants His servants to return to Him, not burned by shame, but renewed through mercy. When you begin to see purification this way, wudu stops being rushed. Ghusl stops feeling heavy. Water becomes a conversation, not a chore. You begin to approach it with presence, knowing that Allah is not just preparing you for Salah, but recalibrating your inner world. So the next time water touches your skin, don't let it end there. Let it reach your heart. Let it remind you that no matter how dusty the road has been, Allah has placed renewal within reach, because a soul that returns to purity regularly does not remain lost for long. One of the greatest tests Allah places before the human being is not hardship, but familiarity. What we see every day slowly loses its ability to move us. What arrives easily stops feeling valuable, and water, perhaps more than anything else, suffers from this neglect. It flows into our lives so quietly, so consistently, that we forget it was ever a miracle. We speak of signs, we search for proof, we ask Allah to show us something extraordinary, while holding the extraordinary in our hands multiple times a day. Psychologically, the human mind is wired to normalize blessings. This is how people survive, but it is also how gratitude erodes. When water is abundant, we complain about its temperature, its pressure, its taste. We leave taps running, we waste without thought, and yet, the moment water becomes scarce, the mind snaps awake. Suddenly, every drop matters, anxiety rises, prayers increase, reflection returns. The question is not whether we recognize Allah in hardship. We usually do. The real question is whether we recognize Him in ease. Allah, in His wisdom, allows the ordinary to test us. The Qur'an does not only speak about patience in difficulty, it speaks repeatedly about gratitude in provision. And gratitude is far more demanding than it appears. Patience requires endurance. Gratitude requires awareness. You must notice the blessing before you can thank Allah for it. Water exposes how often we live unconsciously, moving through mercy without acknowledgement. There is a deep philosophical lesson here. When something is constantly available, we assume it is guaranteed. But nothing in this world is guaranteed. Entire civilizations have vanished because water disappeared. Regions that once flourished became deserts. This should shake the illusion of permanence we carry so comfortably. Water is not ours, it is loaned, and like all loans, it can be reclaimed. This realization is meant to mature faith, not frighten it. When you understand that what you have is not owed to you, entitlement softens. Complaints lose their edge. Even small inconveniences stop dominating your emotional space. Gratitude begins to stabilize the soul. A grateful person is not easily shaken because they are anchored in recognition rather than demand. Think about how rarely we thank Allah for water specifically. We thank Him for food, for success, for safety. But water is often lumped into the background. Yet without it, none of those other blessings survive. This is the nature of foundational gifts. They are invisible until removed. Allah, through water, teaches us that the most critical supports in life are often the least celebrated. And there is accountability in this awareness. Gratitude is not just a feeling, it is a behavior. To be grateful for water means to use it consciously, to avoid waste, to respect its source, and to recognize those who struggle without it. Islam does not separate spirituality from ethics. If your heart claims gratitude but your actions show carelessness, the disconnect needs attention. This point also confronts a modern problem: distraction. We live in an age of constant stimulation, chasing the next notification, the next achievement, the next escape. Gratitude requires stillness. Water invites stillness. When you pause to drink, to wash, to observe rain, you are given a moment to return to the present. These moments, if acknowledged, can become acts of worship. Allah does not overwhelm us with miracles. He surrounds us with them. The test is subtle. Will you notice before loss forces you to? Will you thank Allah while your hands are full, or only when they are empty? The believer is called to awareness in both states, and perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is this: many people only recognize Allah's blessings when they are threatened. That recognition is valid, but it is reactive. Islam calls for something higher, a proactive gratitude that sees Allah's mercy before it is interrupted. Water is the training ground for that awareness, so the next time you turn a tap, slow down, let that moment pass through your heart, not just your hands. Because a person who learns to be grateful for what is ordinary will be resilient when life becomes difficult, and Allah loves the servant who recognizes Him without being forced to. When water disappears, something deeper than physical thirst begins to surface. The body weakens quickly, but the mind and heart reach a point of vulnerability even faster. In moments of dryness, whether in the land or in life, human beings are forced to confront their limits. And it is precisely in these moments that Allah's help often arrives in its most meaningful form. Not loudly, not dramatically, but exactly where life should not have continued. History and revelation are filled with these moments. Think of Hajar, alone in the desert, running between Safa and Marwa, with an infant crying from thirst. No resources, no strength left, just effort, sincerity, and complete reliance, and then water erupts from beneath the feet of a child. Zamzam was not only water, it was a declaration that when human capability ends, divine provision begins. That lesson has not expired. Psychologically, hardship strips away illusion. When everything is comfortable, we credit ourselves. When options vanish, we finally look up. This is not hypocrisy, it is human nature. Allah, in His mercy, does not reject us for it. Instead, He meets us there, at the edge of exhaustion, where ego has no room to speak. Water appearing in hardship is Allah reminding the human being, you are never sustaining yourself to begin with. Water in hardship also teaches precision. Relief does not always come in excess. Zamzam did not flood the desert. It came as a spring, enough to survive, enough to grow, enough to trust. Many people misunderstand Allah's help because they expect dramatic reversals. But Allah often provides sufficiency, not spectacle, and sufficiency, when recognized, strengthens faith far more deeply than excess ever could. Look at your own life. Think of moments when you felt emotionally dry. No motivation, no clarity, no hope. Then suddenly a small opening appeared, a conversation, an opportunity, a sense of calm after weeks of anxiety. It wasn't everything you wanted, but it was enough to keep you going. That is water in hardship. Allah does not always remove the desert. Sometimes He places a spring within it. Philosophically, this teaches us something vital about hope. Hope is not the absence of difficulty, it is the belief that sustenance can exist within difficulty. The believer does not deny the desert. They walk through it with the understanding that Allah's mercy is not bound by environment, logic, or probability. Life should not have survived in many places on earth, yet it did. Your story is not as impossible as you think. There is also a corrective lesson here. Hardship forces sincerity. When water is scarce, no one wastes it. Every drop matters. In ease we spill. In hardship we value. Allah allows scarcity at times not to punish, but to realign perspective. What we once ignored becomes precious. What we once delayed becomes urgent. Dua becomes honest. Dependence becomes real. But here is the key distinction. The believer does not wait for desperation to turn to Allah. They remember what desperation taught them. When ease returns, they carry humility with them. They don't forget the dryness. They don't mock those still searching for water. They become sources of relief themselves. Water appearing in hardship also carries a responsibility. When Allah provides for you in your low point, He is training you to recognize others in theirs. Compassion is born from remembered thirst. If your faith does not soften you after struggle, then the lesson was missed. And notice how Allah often connects water with life returning. Dead land comes alive after rain. Hope returns after despair. Movement returns after stillness. This pattern is not coincidental. Allah is teaching the human mind to associate difficulty with potential, not finality. Just as dry earth does not remain dead forever, a broken phase in life is not a permanent identity. So when you find yourself in a season where everything feels dry, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, don't assume abandonment. Remember how often Allah places water where no one expects it. Remember Zamzam, remember rain after drought, remember the strength that appears when weakness peaks, because a believer who understands this never collapses in hardship. They may bend, they may struggle, they may feel thirsty, but they keep moving. They know that Allah specializes in reviving what the world has given up on. When we reach this point in the conversation, the reflection can no longer remain abstract. If water is life, if it is measured mercy, if it purifies, if it awakens gratitude, and if it appears in hardship as divine relief, then the final question becomes unavoidable. What does all of this demand from us? Because every blessing in Islam is also an amana, a trust, and how we treat water quietly exposes the state of our faith. Allah never describes human beings as owners of the earth. We are caretakers. Stewards, trustees who will be asked how we handled what was placed in our hands. Water, perhaps more than any other blessing, reveals whether we live with awareness or entitlement. When someone wastes water casually, it often isn't arrogance, it's forgetfulness. But forgetfulness, when repeated, hardens into heedlessness, and heedlessness is dangerous to the soul. The Prophet taught restraint even when water was abundant. Even beside a flowing river, waste was discouraged. This was not about scarcity, it was about consciousness. Allah was training the believer to understand that respect for a blessing is not dependent on how much you have, but on how clearly you recognize its source. A heart that truly knows Allah cannot be careless with what Allah sustains life through. Psychologically, responsibility creates maturity. A person who sees themselves as entitled consumes. A person who sees themselves as entrusted preserves. This shift changes everything. You begin to move through the world more gently. You think before you take. You pause before you waste. You understand that your actions ripple outward, affecting lives you may never see. And this is where faith becomes visible. Anyone can speak about belief, anyone can feel inspired in a lecture, but how you treat water when no one is watching, how long you leave the tap running, how indifferent you are to waste, that is where sincerity quietly lives or dies. Islam does not separate belief from behavior. The Qur'an repeatedly links faith with action because true belief produces responsibility. There is also a communal dimension here. Millions of people across the world struggle daily for clean water. This is not a statistic. It is a moral mirror. Allah does not inform us of suffering so that we feel guilty, but so that we become aware. Gratitude without empathy is incomplete. If water has taught you humility, it should also teach you compassion. You don't need to fix the world, but you are required to stop pretending it has nothing to do with you. Philosophically, how a society treats water predicts its future. Waste leads to scarcity. Pollution leads to sickness. Neglect leads to collapse. These are not random outcomes, they are consequences. Allah built accountability into creation itself. The earth responds to how it is treated. When balance is violated, imbalance returns. This is not punishment descending from the sky. It is a system reflecting human behavior back to humanity, and this accountability extends inward. Just as we are entrusted with water, we are entrusted with time, energy, influence, and choice. Water becomes a training ground for a larger truth. If you cannot be trusted with a visible blessing, how will you answer for the invisible ones? If something as simple as water cannot be respected, what about power, wealth, or knowledge? Yet this is not meant to burden the heart, it is meant to awaken it. Responsibility is not heaviness, it is purpose. When you understand that Allah trusts you, life gains meaning. Small actions begin to matter. Turning off a tap becomes an act of worship, conserving becomes remembrance, care becomes faith in motion, and there is hope here. Islam does not demand perfection, it demands consciousness. You will slip. You will forget, but awareness allows correction. The moment you remember Allah, the amana is alive again. That is mercy. So when you next use water, don't rush past the moment. Let it remind you that faith is not only in what you say, but in what you safeguard. Because the believer is not defined by how much they consume, but by how carefully they honor what Allah has placed in their care. And a heart that respects the trust of Allah will never be empty of meaning.